August 16, 1977, Memphis, Tennessee. The air inside Graceland was still. A soft hum from the ceiling fan. The faint echo of footsteps in the hallway. Dr. George Nichopoulos, known to millions as Dr. Nick, stood frozen beside the king's bed. In his trembling hand was a small, folded piece of paper, torn from the back of a prescription pad. 5 words, written in blue ink, hurried but steady. 5 words that would haunt him for the rest of his life and change everything the world thought it knew about Elvis Presley's final hours. August 16, 1977, Graceland. 11:34 a.m. outside. Reporters and fans pressed against the gates, shouting questions that no one could answer. Inside, time had stopped. Paramedics whispered. The walls seemed to absorb every sound. The sweet scent of cologne mixed with medicine hung in the air. Elvis's gold watch still ticked faintly on the nightstand, as if refusing to believe he was gone. Dr. Nick walked in just minutes after the emergency call. He'd seen his patient tired before, sick before, but never like this. He knew the end had come. Still, habit made him check for a pulse. Nothing. He turned motionless until his eyes fell on the dresser. A Bible lay open beside a half-finished glass of water and a crumpled note. The top corner was stained where condensation had bled the ink. He reached for it. 5 words stared back at him. I tried to be kind. For a moment, the doctor thought his mind was playing tricks. Those words felt too deliberate, too final. He slipped the note into his pocket before anyone else entered the room. He didn't know why, only that it felt sacred, like something meant to be protected. Outside the door, an officer called his name. Doc, we need you for the statement. Dr. Nick nodded but said nothing. He walked down the hall in silence, the folded paper warm in his palm. Later that day, as helicopters circled overhead and the world began to mourn, he sat alone in his car, staring at the note again. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't an apology. It was something in between. The handwriting was shaky but strong. The eye pressed hard, the word kind lighter, almost tender. A man reaching for peace, not fame. What do you think a legend writes in his final hours? A secret, or a truth he'd hidden all along? Dr. Nick folded the paper again, placed it back in his wallet, and whispered, You really tried, didn't you, E? Outside, the crowd at the gates kept growing. Some sang Love Me Tender. Others cried quietly, clutching photographs and old ticket stubs. The sound carried through the warm August air like a choir of heartbreak. The doctor closed his eyes and listened. He realized those fans weren't just mourning an icon. They were finishing his song. That night, as the lights of Graceland flickered under the weight of endless candles, the note stayed hidden in his pocket. No one knew it existed. Not yet. But that tiny piece of paper, 5 words and 1 trembling truth, would one day reopen the world's understanding of Elvis Presley and the kindness he fought so hard to keep alive. For 20 years, Dr. George Nichopoulos carried that folded note inside his wallet. Every day he felt it press lightly against his chest, as if reminding him of the promise he never spoke aloud. Publicly, he was Dr. Nick, the man fans blamed, defended, and debated. Privately, he was the guardian of 5 words that could soften or shatter the story of Elvis Presley's final hours. In 1978, the coroner's report was everywhere. Headlines shouted prescription pills, exhaustion, heart failure. But nobody mentioned the Bible on the nightstand. Nobody mentioned the note. Dr. Nick told reporters, Elvis was tired, but hopeful. He said it again and again, but no one believed him. So he stopped trying. He let the world write its own ending, while the truth sat folded in his pocket. Late nights he'd unfold it under the lamplight of his office, staring at those words until they blurred. I tried to be kind. He'd whisper them out loud, half prayer, half confession. What were you trying to tell us, E? In 1993, during a private interview in Nashville, Dr. Nick finally hinted at the secret. He leaned toward the microphone and said quietly, Elvis left something behind. It wasn't a will and it wasn't a confession. It was a reminder. The journalist blinked. A reminder of what? Dr. Nick smiled faintly. that even kings struggle to be good men. But he refused to show the note. When the interviewer pressed, he just said, "The world's not ready." That line became legend. Fans argued for years about what he meant. Some thought Elvis had written an apology. Others imagined a message to his daughter, Lisa Marie. A few believed it was a hidden lyric to an unfinished song. Dr. Nick ignored them all. He'd seen the darkness that rumor could breed, the headlines, the lawsuits, the blame. He wasn't about to let 5 honest words drown in noise. Still, the secret wore on him. He once told his nurse, Megan Scott, "It's like carrying somebody's heartbeat in my pocket." She asked softly, "Then why not let it beat again?" He just looked away. Because when people hear something true, they twist it. What would you have done? Protected his memory or set the truth free? By 1997, the weight became too much. One rainy evening, Dr. Nick sat alone in his study surrounded by unopened fan letters. Outside, thunder rolled over Memphis. He opened his drawer and pulled out the note, edges yellowed, ink fading. For the first time, he placed it on the desk beside a blank page and wrote the words underneath, in his own hand, almost like a vow. He meant every one of them. He knew he couldn't hold it forever, but he also knew he couldn't let it become gossip. That same week, he called a local pastor and asked to meet. No reporters. No cameras. Just a man searching for absolution. When he arrived, he didn't hand over the note, only a copy. The pastor read it slowly, then whispered, "Maybe that was his prayer." Dr. Nick nodded. "Then I guess I've been its witness." For the next 3 years, the copy stayed sealed in the church archives, untouched, unspoken of, until the night Dr. Nick decided the world was finally ready. He picked up the phone, dialed a small radio station in Memphis, and said 6 quiet words that would start a storm. "I'm ready to tell the truth." What he said next would send shockwaves through the entire Elvis community. Memphis, 1997. A humid August night, 20 years to the week since Elvis's passing. Dr. George Nicopolos sat inside a small AM radio studio on Union Avenue, his hands trembling just slightly. The red on-air light glowed against the dark glass. Outside, thunder rumbled over the city, the same kind of storm that had hung above Graceland the morning Elvis died. The host's voice cut through the hum. "Doctor, you said you've kept something from that day, something no one has ever seen. What is it?" Dr. Nick hesitated. He looked down at the worn envelope on the table, the paper inside folded and refolded 100 times. His voice broke slightly. "It's just 5 words," he said. 5 words he left behind. The room went still. The host leaned closer. "Can you tell us what they said?" Dr. Nick opened the envelope. His eyes glistened as he unfolded the note one last time. He whispered, almost to himself, "I tried to be kind." Silence. Then the soft crackle of static. The host blinked. "That's it." Dr. Nick nodded. "That's it." Listeners later said they could feel the weight of those 5 words through the radio. A kind of ache that no song could ever describe. After the broadcast, calls flooded the station. Was it real? What did he mean? Kind to who? Some fans wept. Others doubted it. But those who knew Elvis best said it made perfect sense. Marty Lacker, one of Elvis's old friends, told a reporter the next morning, "That's him. That's exactly who he was. He never wanted to hurt anyone. He just didn't always know how to stop the world from hurting him." Dr. Nick later explained why the note mattered so much. He wrote it after reading a letter from a fan, he said. She told him she felt forgotten, that he'd changed. He told me it broke his heart. He wanted to answer her but didn't know what to say, so he wrote those 5 words. "I tried to be kind." Maybe it wasn't a letter to one person. Maybe it was to everyone. Think about it. If you could sum up your whole life in a single line, what would it say? Years later, analysts would call it the most human thing Elvis ever wrote. No apology. No excuses. Just truth. Dr. Nick said it felt less like a goodbye and more like a confession whispered to heaven. He was tired of being misunderstood, he explained. He just wanted to be remembered for his heart. not his headlines. In the months that followed the reveal, newspapers ran the story across the country. Some mocked it as another myth, but others saw it for what it was, the final lyric of a man who spent his whole life trying to love the world that never stopped watching him. That fall, Dr. Nick received hundreds of letters from fans. One from a woman in Ohio read, "He didn't just try, he succeeded." Another came from a teenager in Japan. "I wasn't alive when he sang, but I want to live like he wrote." The doctor kept every one. But even then, he didn't share the full story. He told one close friend that there was more, something written on the back of the note in smaller letters. When asked what it said, he smiled faintly. "Let's just say," he whispered, "he meant it." That sentence would become the next great mystery. Because when the note resurfaced years later, that second line changed everything we thought we knew about the king. By the early 2000s, Dr. George Nichopoulos had grown older. His hands slower, his voice softer, but his memory still sharp. He no longer practiced medicine. His world had become small. A quiet home, a stack of medical journals, and one small envelope inside his desk drawer. That envelope still held the note. The one the world had obsessed over. The one that ended with 5 unforgettable words. "I tried to be kind." But what the world didn't know, what even most of Elvis's inner circle never learned, was that there was something written on the back. Dr. Nick hadn't mentioned it during the 1997 radio interview. He said once, "Some truths need time before they're ready to be heard." That time came in 2002. One humid afternoon in Memphis, Dr. Nick's son, Dean, stopped by his father's house. They talked about the past, about the fans, about the stories that would never die. Then, as Dean stood to leave, his father reached for the drawer. "Son," he said quietly, "you should see this before I'm gone." He unfolded the paper with shaking fingers. The ink on the front had faded slightly, but on the back, scrawled smaller, as if written in a hurry, were 5 new words. "Tell them I meant it." Dean stared at it, stunned. He wrote on both sides?" Dr. Nick nodded. "I never showed that part. Didn't want to turn it into a circus." He explained that when he'd first picked up the note in 1977, he'd only seen the front. It wasn't until years later, when the paper began to thin from age, that he noticed the faint outline of handwriting bleeding through. He turned it over, and there it was. "Tell them I meant it." Those words felt like an echo across time. A man speaking to the future, asking only to be understood. Dr. Nick's voice cracked as he told his son. He knew they'd question him, knew they'd twist everything. He just wanted someone, anyone, to believe he was trying. Dean asked, "Do you think he wrote it for you?" Dr. Nick looked away. "Maybe for all of us." When the news quietly broke months later, leaked by an anonymous archivist, fans around the world were floored. It wasn't just a sentimental message anymore. It was a testament. Elvis wasn't apologizing for fame or failure. He was declaring that his kindness, his love, his struggle were real, that he meant every word he ever said on that stage. Newspapers ran the headline, "Second line found on Elvis's note. Tell them I meant it." Crowds flooded Graceland again, leaving letters taped to the gates. Some simply wrote, "We believe you. You did mean it. Thank you for trying." The phrase began appearing on shirts, fan art, even tattooed across arms and wrists, because somehow those 8 final words captured what millions had always felt but never said. "I tried to be kind. Tell them I meant it." Dr. Nick, seeing the reaction, wept. He later told a journalist, maybe this was his last performance. Not a song, but a confession written in silence. Years later, Megan Scott, the forensic specialist tasked with authenticating the paper, would say something haunting. "When I put it under the microscope," she said, "you could see where the pen paused. He hesitated, right before writing the word meant. It was like he wanted to get it just right. What would you have done if you were him? Tried to be perfect or tried to be kind?" By the end of that year, the note was sealed inside a temperature-controlled frame at Graceland's private archives. Dean visited the display the day it was placed there. His hand rested on the glass as he whispered, "They know now, Dad. He meant it." Outside, the fans sang softly under the evening sky. Their candles flickered like tiny stars across the gates, each one burning with the same message. And in the warm Memphis air, it felt as if the king was finally at peace. Spring 2003, Nashville. The note sat under bright laboratory lights, inside the Tennessee Museum of Music Conservation. Megan Scott, the forensic specialist brought in to authenticate it, leaned close to the microscope. She'd examined letters from presidents, musicians, and poets, but nothing quite like this. The paper was thin, yellowed by decades of air and touch. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, until she looked closer. There were pressure marks, tiny grooves where the pen had paused. The ink shimmered faintly, unevenly pressed, told its own story. Elvis started this sentence more than once, Megan whispered. He was rewriting his soul. Under ultraviolet light, faint outlines appeared beneath the final words. He had written, "I tried to do right," then crossed it out. Next, "I tried to stay true," crossed out again. Finally, "I tried to be kind." She froze. That was it, the moment he stopped trying to sound perfect and decided to be honest. When Megan reported her findings to Dean Nicopolos, he sat in silence for a long time. "It's like he was editing his heart," he said, trying to find the words simple enough to carry the weight. The museum released a brief statement. The note is authentic. The handwriting matches Presley's 1977 entries. The ink and paper date correctly. But the technical truth wasn't what moved people. It was what the evidence meant. Each change, each hesitation, revealed a man trying to forgive himself. You could almost hear it in the pauses, see it in the way his pen hovered over the page. Megan later said, "You can tell when someone writes for the world and when they write for themselves." Elvis was writing for peace. When news of the findings reached Memphis, journalists flooded Graceland. They wanted to see the note for themselves. But Lisa Marie kept it private. She said quietly during a short press statement, "He spent his life giving the world his voice. This was the only time he gave it his silence." That single line echoed across TV screens everywhere. Dr. Nick, now in frail health, gave one final interview. He said, "Elvis could have written anything, a song, a quote, a lyric, but he chose 5 words because that's all a tired heart needs." He paused, eyes glistening. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise that even when he couldn't keep singing, his kindness would keep speaking. Weeks later, Megan visited Graceland to hand over the authenticated report. As she left the museum, a fan stopped her at the gate. He held a worn photograph of Elvis and said, "Do you think he really meant it?" She smiled softly. "Every line of ink says he did." The fan nodded, tears in his eyes. "Then that's all that matters. Sometimes the smallest truths survive because someone cared enough to prove them." Inside the museum archive, the note was sealed in a glass frame, alongside a small brass tag that read, "Preserved by Dr. G. Nicopolos family, verified 2003. Next to it sat the gold pen Elvis used that summer, the initials EP engraved near the nib. Under certain lights, you could still see a small streak of blue where the ink had leaked. It's strange how something so small can outlive everything else. Records, awards, even the man himself. That evening, Megan stood alone before the display. The reflection of the note shimmered across the glass like a ghost. She whispered, "You didn't fail, Elvis. You just tried to be kind. And that was enough." A quiet hum from the air vents filled the room, like the faint beginning of a hymn. If you were to look closely at the note today, you'd still see those 3 faint beginnings beneath the final line. Each one, a version of the man the world thought they knew. But only one survived, the truest one. Because even legends only get one last edit. And this time, Elvis got it right. August 16th, 2007, 30 years to the day. Graceland glowed like a candle under the Tennessee night sky. Thousands gathered at the gates, holding roses, flashlights, and tears that had outlived a generation. The air was thick with humidity and hymns. Somewhere near the meditation garden, a single microphone stood under a pale blue spotlight. Dr. George Nicopolos, now 79, walked slowly toward it. The crowd quieted. The sound of cicadas filled the silence. He paused, gripping the podium with both hands. "I kept something for 30 years, he began. "Not for myself, for him." His voice trembled. "People said Elvis was larger than life. But he wasn't. He was just trying to be kind, same as the rest of us." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small frame, the note, sealed behind glass. "These," he said softly, "were his last written words." The audience leaned forward. You could hear the distant rustle of paper as he adjusted the microphone. He took a deep breath and read, "I tried to be kind." And then, with his voice breaking, he added, "Tell them I meant it." The air changed. For a moment, no one made a sound. No coughs. No whispers. Just the heavy, collective heartbeat of thousands of people realizing they were hearing the king's final message for the first time. Then came the applause. Long, thunderous, emotional. People held each other and cried openly. Some knelt. Some whispered prayers. Others just stared up at the night sky. Lisa Marie, standing at the back near the garden gate, wiped a tear and smiled softly. The doctor continued, his voice quiet but clear. "He wasn't perfect. None of us are. But those words, that was him. That was the man I knew. That's what he wanted the world to remember." He looked out over the sea of flickering candles. "He gave us his music," he said. "But this was his heart." The crowd began softly singing "Can't Help Falling in Love." Their voices wavered but strong, rising and falling with the rhythm of grief and grace. A soft breeze swept through the courtyard, and the candles shimmered in unison, 1,000 tiny flames keeping time. Some said it felt as if Elvis himself had walked among them that night. Later, reporters surrounded Dr. Nick outside the gates. One asked, "Doctor, why share it now?" He smiled sadly. "Because the world's noisy again," he said, "and kindness is still being drowned out. Maybe he knew it always would be." Another asked, "What will happen to the note?" Dr. Nick looked toward the glowing mansion behind him. "It belongs here, with him." Within weeks, Graceland announced that the note and Elvis's gold pen would be displayed permanently in the museum's reflections room. When the exhibit opened, visitors lined up for hours. Some cried, some prayed, others simply stared. There was no music playing in the background, only silence. The sound Elvis had chased his whole life. That night, after the crowds left, a custodian found Dr. Nick sitting alone on a bench near the garden. He was holding a candle, watching it flicker. When asked if he was all right, he smiled faintly. "I just realized," he said. The world finally heard him. "Not the singer, the man." The custodian nodded. "And what did he say, sir?" Dr. Nick whispered. "He said he tried to be kind." The flame flickered once, then went out. But somehow the garden didn't feel dark, because even in silence, those 5 words still glowed. After that night at Graceland, the note stopped being a secret. It became a heartbeat the whole world could hear. Fans from every continent began sending letters to Memphis, not asking for autographs, but promising to live by 5 words. "I tried to be kind." A retired teacher from Finland wrote, "He reminded me it's never too late to soften." A teenager from Brazil said, "I never heard his music before, but now I want to be better." That's his gift. Even skeptics admitted something unusual was happening. The world wasn't just mourning Elvis anymore. It was learning from him. By 2008, Graceland received over 40,000 handwritten notes from fans. Each one carried a version of kindness. Some were prayers, others confessions. They called it the Kindness Wall. Lisa Marie visited one morning before the gates opened. She ran her fingers along the rows of pinned letters and whispered, "He'd have loved this more than any gold record." Behind her, the curator placed a bronze plaque that read, "In memory of Elvis Aaron Presley, who tried to be kind." That same year, a small nonprofit started by fans became a global foundation, the Presley Promise. Its mission was simple: fund music lessons for children in need and spread messages of compassion through art. Their slogan came directly from the note, "Be kind and mean it." By 2012, the movement had grown far beyond Memphis. High schools across America introduced Kindness Week. Radio hosts replayed the Graceland broadcast every August 16th. And across the ocean, in Tokyo, a street mural of Elvis's smile appeared with those 5 words painted beneath it. I tried to be kind. During a rare interview, Lisa Marie said softly, Dad didn't want perfection. He wanted peace. He wanted people to try. She paused, eyes glistening. He didn't always get it right, but maybe that's why his message works. Because neither do we. Her words spread faster than any headline. Suddenly, trying to be kind became a challenge, not a quote. People began leaving sticky notes on cafe tables, gas pumps, and school lockers that simply read, Keep trying. Dr. Nick lived long enough to see it all. Before his passing in 2011, a journalist asked him, Do you regret keeping the note secret for so long? He smiled faintly. No, he said, because the world wouldn't have listened back then. Now they're ready. Now they're kind. A year later, during the annual candlelight vigil, the foundation unveiled a small bronze statue in the meditation garden. A hand holding a folded piece of paper. On it were those final 8 words, engraved for eternity. I tried to be kind. Tell them I meant it. When the crowd saw it, the air filled with applause. Some cried quietly, others simply placed flowers at the base. The moment felt less like mourning, more like reunion. It was as if Elvis's final act had finally found its audience. That night, as the candles flickered in the Memphis heat, a young boy asked his grandmother, What did Elvis mean, Grandma? She smiled gently. He meant to keep trying, even when it's hard. And that's what people did. From the quiet corners of Graceland to the farthest cities of the world, those words echoed softly, turning strangers into something more. A community bound by one human promise. If you ever visit Graceland today, you'll see it carved into the marble near the garden. Love isn't perfection. It's kindness, meant and remembered. People stop, read it, and often whisper a promise to themselves, I'll try too. And in that whisper, in that small, invisible rhythm of grace, Elvis still lives. They called him the King. But in the end, Elvis Presley's final words weren't about fame, music, or legacy. They were about something much harder, kindness. All his life, he gave the world a sound. But those last words gave it silence. A silence filled with meaning. I tried to be kind. 5 simple words that outlived the man, the legend, and even the myth. What do we leave behind when the applause fades? Maybe not gold records or sold-out tours. Maybe we leave something smaller, the way we made people feel. Elvis understood that too late. But maybe that's what makes the message so timeless. Because those words weren't just written for him. They were written for everyone still trying. Trying to be patient. Trying to forgive. Trying to love, even when it hurts. He knew the world would remember his voice. But he wanted it to remember his heart. And maybe that's the real measure of greatness. Not how loud the world claps when you rise, but how softly it remembers you when you're gone. Today, fans still gather at Graceland every August 16th. The lights glow, the songs play, and in the middle of all that noise, someone always whispers the same line. He tried to be kind. They say if you stand by the meditation garden long enough, you can hear the faint echo of his laughter carried in the wind. It's not spooky. It's warm, like a thank you whispered back. Because maybe legends never really leave. They just become the stories that remind us how to live better. In the end, Elvis's final note wasn't a goodbye. It was a challenge to live with grace, to lead with kindness, and to keep trying, even when the rhythm feels offbeat. And that's the secret he left us. Not a crown. Not a throne, just a small, crumpled piece of paper, and a message big enough to outlive eternity. I tried to be kind. Tell them I meant it. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes kindness matters. Because behind every spotlight, there's a soul still learning to love out loud. Were you ever at Graceland? Tell us your memory and remember, you don't need to be a king to change the world. You just have to mean it.